Pac-12 has not made the college football playoff since 2016, and they probably ain't making it this year. Utah upsets USC 47-24 in the Pac-12 championship. Utah wasn't even supposed to be in this game. Do you know what they needed to happen to even get to this game? They needed UCLA to win at Cal last weekend. They needed to win at Colorado. They needed Oregon State to beat Oregon. And they needed Washington to beat Washington State. All of that happened. And then they won their game on this night against USC. This is chaos. This is why we watch college football. Even though there's favorites and there's lines that are set, and we think, yeah, USC minus 2.5 or minus 3. This is a lock. USC is going to win this game. Caleb Williams is going to lock up the Heisman Trophy. They're going to go to the college football playoff. Maybe they'll even sneak up to the third ranking and have to avoid Georgia in the first round. None of that's happening. They couldn't tackle. They couldn't stop Cameron Rising. I mean, I'm befuddled. Utah rising up. Let's get some instant analysis. Welcome in CBS Sports HQ college football analyst Barrett, Sallee, and former Louisiana running back Emory Hunt. And USC was trying to avenge its only regular season loss to Utah and win the Pac-12 championship. Well, guess what? The Utes flipped the script. The Utes did not follow the script. They said, forget that. We're going to beat you twice in the same season and win the Pac-12 championship in 2 years in a row. Barrett, your reaction is what to the game you just watched?
My jaw, Hakeem, is still on the floor. I did not see that coming. I mean, look, in a world where college football has been crazy all year, I guess this makes sense. And this is the way Utah would probably have to beat USC anyway. But USC was rolling, not just offensively, but defensively. That opportunism, that opportunistic style has been with them all year. And then it completely disappeared. Like you said, Cameron Rising went all over them. This is a Utah team that was without their best running back, and they still whipped USC. It is utterly shocking. It felt before this game like USC was on a mission. They were getting hot at the right time, and it just all came crashing down. And look, I know Caleb Williams and that hurt leg was a part of this. I get it. But that still does not make up for the fact that Utah's defensive line flat out whipped USC in the trenches. And then Utah's offensive line probably deserves to be MVP. I did not see this coming at all. It was a big statement for Utah, and USC just flat out laid an egg in its biggest game in more than a half decade.
We have to acknowledge that Kyle Whittingham, number one, is a better coach than Lincoln Riley.
Yes.
Number two, we also have to understand that they just won the Joe Moore Award given to the nation's top offensive line in Utah. And thirdly, philosophy matters. Notice what happened in the first half when Caleb Williams was out there running around, making plays, dazzling us, locked up his Heisman Trophy, and we thought in the first half, then he gets injured, and then we saw USC have no plan, have no philosophy. What happens if Caleb Williams gets hurt? What is our base philosophy? What's our foundation? Utah's foundation, hey, regardless of what happens, we will line up, we will run the football, we will play great point of attack defense. You saw none of that for USC once Williams got injured, and therefore they didn't have a plan. Utah had a plan. They stayed true to that plan. They executed that plan, and we've seen this plan time and time again. I go back to when they beat the brakes off Bama in the Sugar Bowl when they were in the Mountain West Conference. It's always about point of attack play, attack style defense, running the football, efficient in the passing game. Don't beat yourself. They have a philosophy, a foundation, and it's been tried and true over the course of Whittingham's career. We've seen the same type of action from Lincoln Riley's team dating back to Oklahoma in big games. So we have to give Whittingham and Utah their credit, because credit is definitely due, and is due a lot tonight for what they did to USC.
Yeah, and a questionable decision that came early in the second quarter by Lincoln Riley. They go for it on 4th and 8 with about 10:30 to play. Turnover on downs. Utah scores a touchdown. Then USC punts. And then another touchdown from Utah, a 14-point swing to make it 17 all at halftime. And Barrett, thankfully for halftime, USC wouldn't be down at halftime because it came at the right time. But that was huge in the game, a turning point for USC when they go for it on fourth down and do not convert.
It was, but I'm not going to get that upset at Lincoln Riley for that. First of all, they were hot on fourth down. They've been hot on fourth down all year long. And they were in that spot where it's like, all right, do you really kick it and risk a touchback where you gain, 15, 20 yards of field position? I'm okay with Lincoln Riley going there because at the time anyway, he had a hot quarterback who at that point was not that banged up. So you can't predict the future. You can't predict Caleb Williams getting injured. And at that time, hindsight's 2020, I get it, but I really don't have a problem with Lincoln Riley going for that. It just didn't work. And, just because it didn't work does not make it the right decision at that time. And look, that's not the reason they lost this game. Sure, it could have been a turning point. And I think right now looking back at it, yeah, it was a turning point. But if you're in no man's land like that, I'm fine with going forward. I don't know what the analytics say. I don't have the book in front of me, but I would probably guess that the analytics say that's a pretty good bet. Even though it was 4th and 7, 4th and 8, I still think it was the right decision. It just didn't work.
Yeah, you know what else didn't work? USC's tackling. And Emory, this was a
Yes.
point of focus for Alex Grinch, the DC for USC. He said, we've got to tackle better, comparing to the last game that they played in the regular season and lost by 1. Cameron Rising led him on a touchdown drive, scored the game-winning 2-point conversion. They were poor at tackling. I always like to say they need to log on to howtomakeatackle.com because that was some of the worst technique I've seen in a game of this magnitude, Emory.
.com, .biz, .net, .org, all of them. Log on to all of them, learn how to tackle. It's not just making one tackle, man. It's about making these tackles consistently over the course of a 4-quarter physical game, and that's what Utah brings. This is not a situation where a team may like to run the football here and there. You make that tackle, great, we get off the field. Utah will test how much you want to stop the run. And I've always said this, stopping the run is about attitude and want to. You have to really want to stop the run. You have to want to get into a physical discussion with someone over the course of a 60-minute game. Utah was ready for that fight. They're built for that fight. We found out tonight USC is nowhere near that type of fracas they want to get into on any given Saturday.
Yeah, you know what? We talk about, Lincoln Riley's offense and not having a plan B. It's almost like USC's defense didn't have a plan B either because, yeah, you're right, Emory. They just were not physical. They didn't want any of that smoke from Utah. They have been an opportunistic defense all year long, and that's why they've been successful. But if they didn't force those turnovers, they didn't have an option. They didn't have another identity. They have not been physical all year long, and it showed because I think they got kind of put in a spin cycle by Utah. They got punched in the mouth. They realized that, hey, you know what? We're not forcing those turnovers. What can we do? It certainly wasn't tackling, and it wasn't scheme either. I think Alex Grinch deserves a ton of criticism here because he did not get his team ready to play. And yeah, the tackling was atrocious. I mean, it was flat out awful. But it was more about the physicality or the lack of willingness to even stick your nose in there and try to make a tackle that I think was really disturbing. And if you're looking at a scapegoat here, if you're looking at somebody to blame, I absolutely think it's the defensive staff for USC.
Yeah, meantime, Utah's defensive coordinator, Morgan Scalley, he makes the adjustments after that first half because, look, Caleb Williams looked fantastic in the first half. I mean, he was looking like every bit of the Heisman Trophy winner. But then Utah scores 23 points in the fourth quarter. I mean, just absolutely blew the doors off the Trojans. And look, this Utah team, they needed a lot of help to get here, Emory. They needed UCLA to win at Cal. They needed to beat Colorado last week, which they did. They needed Oregon State to win at Oregon. And they needed Washington to win at Washington State. All that stuff happened. So then if you think you're Utah, you're like, wow, this was a game of destiny for us. But in the end, Emory, this hurts the conference. Because ultimately, the Pac-12 will get no thanks. You're not getting into the college football playoff, and it goes another year without this conference playing for a title.
I mean, should we not be calling for Utah to get into the playoff too, based off what we just saw?
Go for it. Call for it.
Put them in. I want to see Utah play now. I want to see more of the Utes. But you're right. It hurts the conference this season, but it kind of helps us when we're talking about the expansion of the playoffs, right? Because we will get to see a Utah play in the playoffs based off what we just saw against a USC if this scenario happened once again. But yeah, it hurts the Pac-12 now, but man, you want to see competitiveness like this throughout the course of a season. And this is why we needed the expanded playoff, because yeah, you can be playing your best ball at the right time. I want to see more Utah football. I won't get to see that until a bowl game, but I'm talking about I want to see it in a playoff game. And this is the type of statement game, the type of impact having an expanded playoffs can, elevate the conversation and move things forward. Because again, this team could be getting hot at the right time. We've seen this in college basketball and baseball and all across the other levels of football that have the playoff. We want to see more Utah, and this was the perfect opportunity for them to make that case.
Don't lose to an average Florida team if you're Utah. Zip it. I'm sorry. I can't. I've conceded the election. You guys, I've gotten off my stance. You're still wrong, but I'm giving up the fight for the expanded playoff. You guys are still wrong. But I think for the Pac-12, this is actually, to me, look, okay, USC did not take advantage of its opportunity. And, I think for USC, that's very unfortunate. USC and UCLA are leaving. I think one thing that is important is you have a new juggernaut in the Pac-12, and that's Utah. 2 straight Pac-12 titles. That's important. You have Oregon staying on the national stage. You have Oregon State finishing the season, probably 20 in the AP poll, depending on what they do in their bowl game. That's important. You have UCLA, obviously, having some success to make the Pac-12 relevant now, but that brought eyeballs to the other teams that are in that conference. And we'll see what happens on Sunday. You might have a little bit of a prime time destination coming in Boulder, Colorado. So I think the fact that Utah has had this kind of success, that Oregon has been on the national stage, that Oregon State's rising, that Washington has established its identity as one of the most pass-happy and successful passing offenses in the entire country, and you maybe have a high-profile coach going to Colorado, that all kind of coincides with Utah's budding dynasty in the Pac-12. So you guys can talk about your playoff, and yes, USC blew its chance. I just will keep my mouth shut. I'm still right. I'm still right. You guys are wrong, but I've given up making my political stance.
There's no politics here. We just talk sports. No politics on CBS Sports HQ. None of that nonsense. We talk sports. We talk winners. We talk losers. We talk spreads.
You're still wrong. You're still wrong.
Look, in all fairness, Barrett, I understand your side of it. I do. I really do. And the value of each game in the regular season, the value of conference championships, I understand all of it. We love this sport. But that's not the way it's going. It's going to expansion. We have to accept it. And the only thing we can do is all root for the success of it. We can shake our heads. But I side with both you and Emory, because I'm on his side with the fact that I want to see Utah more and see them get in the playoff. You know who we are going to see?
I will do my best as somebody on the other side of the aisle. I will do my best as somebody on the other side of the aisle to work with you expansionists to further the success of college football.
All right. I love it. Hey, you know what? You're both friends to me, so I appreciate you both. Great conversation. Appreciate it. Utah pulling off the upset in the Pac-12 championship, defeating USC 47-24. Barrett, Sallee, Emory Hunt here on CBS Sports HQ. Thank you, men. And hey, we've got 3 conference championship games on Saturday with playoff implications. At noon Eastern, third-ranked TCU takes on Kansas State in Arlington, Texas for the Big 12 championship. 4 o'clock, it's number 1 Georgia against LSU in Atlanta for the SEC title game. You can watch on CBS and streaming live on Paramount+. Then at 8 Eastern, second-ranked Michigan looking to stay perfect, facing Purdue in Indianapolis for the Big Ten championship.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.